Hey guys, just wanted to do kind of a fun video because I've just done a video on the Rolex Yachtmaster 40 because I just got it recently, and especially when I was going through the size, it kind of struck me that it's almost identical in size to another watch in my collection. So just kind of gave me an idea for one of my kind of oddball comparison reviews. I did one on the Daytona and the Speedmaster, so this will be kind of the same thing. It's not really to pick a winner or anything like that. It's just to kind of talk about the similarities and differences. So yeah, so I'll get started. So basically the biggest similarity of these is going to be the size. So I guess I'll go through the sizes because I just took all of the exact sizes. So the lug to lug on the U50 is 47.2 millimeters, and on the Yachtmaster it is 47 even. The bezel on the U50 is 40.9, so just about 41, and that's where it gets its name as a 41 millimeter. The bezel on the Yachtmaster is 39.9. So it's one of the biggest differences, but surprisingly enough, I'd say they wear and they are basically exactly the same size, and I'll get into that in a minute. Another dimension that's often given is the link to link, so kind of end link to end link. The Rolex has a solid end link, whereas the U50 has a solid end link, but it has kind of a actuating piece here, articulating, whatever you want to call it, but it doesn't bend all the way down. So it is a slightly bigger link to link dimension at 50.8 millimeters, and the Rolex is just a solid end length that's 50.2 millimeters, so still pretty close. The case of the Sinn is slightly smaller than the bezel, if you can see there, and the case itself is exactly 40 millimeters, 40.0, whereas the case on the Yachtmaster actually flares out beyond the extremity or the outside of the bezel. So that the case, if you measure with your calipers, it's hard to see because I'm using unnatural light here, but if you go from 10 to 40, is 41.6. So it's actually slightly bigger than the 41 millimeter U50, even though they call it a 40 millimeter. And the height is also very similar, and it's one of my favorite things about both of these watches, and kind of what really drew me to both of them. They're both just over 11 millimeters. So the U50 is and with the calipers is 11.2, and the Yachtmaster is 11.6. But believe it or not, and one of the things I like about the Yachtmaster the best is that it actually wears even slimmer than the U50 for a couple of reasons. It appears to be a little slimmer because the U50 has a very straight cut flank, so the mid case is flat, and like the side of it is completely flat, whereas the Yachtmaster has more of a curve to it. Well, it does have a curve to it, so it doesn't kind of wear as chunky. And the case back on the Yachtmaster is a bit deeper, but it also disappears better on the wrist because, so I'm not getting a lot of light, the light's coming from in that direction, but the Yachtmaster and the Rolex bezels, they are slightly conical, so they go into the wrist, because in the wrist bone there's kind of a divot here, and these case backs seem to just kind of fit right in to that little groove, whereas a flatter case back, even though there is a curve to this, it's just a wider surface area that actually touches the skin, so it doesn't kind of disappear as much. Now it still wears really well, but the Yachtmaster even appears to wear even better than the one that's almost half a millimeter slimmer. And part of it too, I didn't measure to the top of the Cyclops because I don't really consider that part of the height, but the Sapphire is flush on the U50, whereas the Sapphire on the Yachtmaster is a bit proud, and that's part of the height as well. So, but when you see the watch, or when you wear the watch, it doesn't really give the impression of being as thick as the top of the Sapphire. You kind of just see to the, it just wears kind of to the top of the bezel more. So anyway, that's just a bunch of small details, but it all adds up to the Yachtmaster actually wears a little bit better. They both have a pretty decent curve to them, but also the Yachtmaster does hug the wrist and kind of curve around the wrist even better, even apart from the case back too. So it just kind of hugs the wrist and wears a little bit better. But anyway, that's not really like a deal breaker or anything like that. Obviously, it's like fractions of a millimeter that they differ, and how they wear is pretty much the same. So they're both great for that. So that's one of the kind of the similarities is not only do they have the same size, but they both wear very well. So yeah, now they do have some other similarities, but at the same time, though they're the same size and they have some similarities, they're kind of like very, very different as well. So it kind of makes it interesting comparison, if not a very relevant comparison. I don't think people would be cross-shopping these and go for, like if they weren't going for this, they'll go for this. There are probably other options you'll be looking for if you're looking at these, but at the same time, there are some interesting points that they do have in common. So apart from the size, they have like red details, which is, like a minor detail, but they do share that both in the text on the bottom. Oh, it's hard. You can see the legibility difference right away, but yeah, there's some red text on the Yachtmaster, and the U50 has some of its details in red, and then the second hands are also red. So that's interesting. That was not why I did the video, but it was one of the things that they're similar in. And they both have rotating bezels, and the rotating bezels, unlike a lot of watches, are the same color as the case. They're kind of like monochrome with the case rather than matching the dial, which is interesting because a lot of rotating bezels usually match the dial rather than the case. They're both automatic watches with the date, and they're both kind of purportedly professional models, although they're different professions. And I don't know, I guess you could be a professional yachtsman, but it's not very common. I don't think you'd pick this watch. I think some professional divers might pick a watch like this as their backup. I know a lot of rescue divers and professional divers do still wear a mechanical watch as a backup, if only to just have like another timing instrument just as a secondary one. Like I've talked to rescue divers that do use a mechanical watch because, let's say, if their partner is going in, I mean, they'll have a dive computer, but if their partner maybe is going in, somewhere alone or with another team member or something, it just gives them another kind of timing organ. So, it's not only a backup, but it's kind of just like another timer that you can use to so it's probably not going to be your main one, but it is good to have. So there, so anyway, that's my little professional tie. They're both the Yachtmaster is considered part of the professional line. Now I think even the Submariners and pretty much all the professional line, I don't think there's a very strong link to actual professionals using it for their intended purpose. But anyway, that's part of their kind of design. And they're both legible. I know it's not as good in this light, especially. You can see how much more legible the U50 is, but they are both legible and they both have good lume. So those are some of the similarities. But again, as I say, they have a lot more different than they do in common, I think. And And as I was saying, the legibility definitely goes to the Sinn U50. When I was reviewing it, I almost said like, this is a watch that you could like almost see it in a photograph from somebody wearing it across the room, and you know what time it was almost. It's that legible. It's kind of like extremely legible to the point of almost like being cartoonish. People don't like the design sometimes because, but you know, I like the design. This has a very original design. The Yachtmaster is obviously pretty derivative of the Submariner. But the U50, I mean, it's derivative of the U1, but it's basically just another version of the U1. And I know the style, the design is kind of divisive, but I really like it in the sense that they've kind of maximized how legible it can be, and how simple it can be at the same time, because they have these blocky hands. So the huge blocks, I mean, if they were any other shape, they would be, you know, like necessarily less legible, because they'd have to be, you know, you'd have to cut some of the block away to make it a different shape. So it's super legible, but then it also has that little, you know, that little protrusion that gives you a lot of precision as well, because you can tell right down. I usually try to set them pretty well. Let's see, when it lines up in the 30 seconds, like you can see the fractions of a minute that huge minute hand is, you know, it's exactly halfway through the minute, and you can really see that, and you can see it from pretty far away. So it has a great deal of precision as well as this massive legibility. So I think it's really kind of clever how they did that. And as other people have pointed out in reviews, like there's a lot of kind of uniformity to the design too. Like, for example, the Rolex kind of just has some quirkiness. I mean, it has the triangle. It's missing a marker. You know, the Mercedes hand is just kind of like idiosyncrasy. You know, it's not really, the hands don't really have a strong link to the dial. So with this, it's just completely uniform. All of the hour markers look the same. They look the same as the tip of the hand. You know, you have that huge legibility and the precision. So it's really, you know, you have to give its credit for what it is, and it is designed very much as a usable watch. So I think they do deserve some design points on that for sure. The Sinn is going to be a lot more water resistant. Obviously, it is a purpose-built tool watch. Even if it's not only for diving, it's for anything. You know, I mean, Sinn makes a lot of watches for different types of, you know, hard use. It's used by the military, you know, special groups of the government, and like the famous GSG-9 watches that were made for kind of the Special Border Patrol, which is kind of their counter-terrorist team. And so they make these watches really with modern day use in mind, and I think they accomplish that pretty well. So it obviously has more of the, this is a true diving watch, whereas this has a dive type bezel, but it's bidirectional, so it's not quite that that up to the standard of a real diver. So so definitely would get points for being a bit more usable in that regard, and fit to purpose. And then that raises a different question though, because I was trying to think, I mean, what would be a more versatile watch? And that would really be, I guess, at the end of the day, would be what person would be using it, obviously, how they would define versatile. And I think, so that's kind of where they really start to split. If somebody were going to buy one of these watches as their only watch, because I think they're a good candidate to be your only watch. And in that context, I think you could really tell that if someone were going to pick one or the other of these as their only watch, it would kind of say a lot about them. Because, you know, you can tell, I mean, this would be much more utilitarian, and it's a watch that you would buy really to use and kind of use with abandon, I think. I don't think that many people are going to be like keeping this in tip-top shape, even though the tegimenting is pretty good, and we'll talk about that. But so you might call the other, each watch, my point is, I think each watch could be considered more versatile to different people, because while the U50 is extremely usable, and I think it'll be used as intended by somebody, if they were going to buy it as their only watch, it would be like a real daily driver slash, right down to beater. It doesn't have the versatility of going kind of above that in terms of, being a part of their style. So it there is a certain style in pure utility, but at the same time, it kind of limits itself being that extremely, utilitarian in design. Whereas the Yachtmaster has a surprising amount of versatility, because especially with the blue dial, it is very casual. If you, depending on how you dress, it could be extremely casual, and it is slightly more eye-catching than you might want if you were dressing really casually, but at the same time, there's no basement or lower extreme to how casual this could be. If you follow me on that, like you could be wearing just about the most casual thing on earth, and it wouldn't be clashing with it, but it's also it could dress up pretty well. I hesitate to call this like actually dressy because of the blue dial and because of the rotating bezel and just the kind of loudness of it, and the red splash of color. I don't think you could go all the way up to an actual dress watch, but at the same time, in modern day, I don't think people frequently need a dressier watch than this. So it'll definitely go up to, dressing up, going out, being a special occasion watch and all that. So I think the U50 would fall a bit flat for that. Now, of course, it will still be, this type of watch. The red is pretty loud, but this type of standard, all steel watch is considered kind of passable for suits and all that in this day and age, obviously, for the past couple of decades, probably, definitely in this decade. But I think the Rolex has more kind of upward mobility, if you want to look at it like that, for being dress upable. So yeah, I think the versatility really depends on the person. I think you could make an argument that each one is a bit more versatile. I think the U50 is more versatile in how you'd actually use it, and the Rolex will give you more options for, going from casual to dressy. So that was probably too long of a rant on versatility, but anyway, it's kind of, like I say, it really depends on the person. But in terms of usability, this is the fully tegimented version of the U50, and I always try to get the kind of the all the options, just because I don't know, it's kind of like, the old adage of always buy it on the bracelet, because it's just, you want the total package, even if you're going to wear it on a strap, buy the bracelet. I think the same holds true for something like tegimenting. If there's a version that comes in fully tegimented rather than just the bezel, which the base one is just the bezel, which so I should say tegimenting is their process. I'm sure if you're watching this video, I'm sure you probably know, but in case you don't, tegimenting is where they take the really high quality submarine steel that they use for their diving watches, which is already much harder than a steel like 904L or the 316L on most watches. So it's a stainless, like highly corrosion resistant, just very strong. I think it's something like an HYT, like a high yield strength steel. And it is used by German submarine manufacturers. So it's just harder. It's anti-magnetic. It's anti-corrosive. I think it's anti-alert, like hypoallergenic and stuff like that. So it's just a very high quality steel that they start with, and then they put it into an oven, and they put in a very carbon rich gas into the oven. So they get it not so that it'll melt the steel, obviously, but to a temperature where the steel will react with the carbon that's in the air. So obviously I'm not a metallurgist, but carbon is one of the things that adds hardness to steel. It take iron and you add carbon and it becomes steel, and it becomes harder and and also tougher, and interestingly. So that carbon it basically makes the surface a very like a high carbon steel, so that it's just much harder. I forget the Vickers, but I think it's like over 1,000 Vickers. I'm kind of recalling 1,200. I could be wrong, but it's something like that. So whereas the 904 would probably be in the only a couple of hundred Vickers. So it makes a big difference, and it does make a big difference because these watches are known to pretty much you know, look like new for a long time. But I'll tell you, it's not impervious. As you can see, I've definitely scratched this up, and this is only a few months old, so it's not don't let anybody fool you. It's not Superman steel, but it is good, and it is a really good process, and it is worth getting because I abuse this watch to do that. So if you abuse it, you will get marks, but I don't abuse, I don't mind abusing it with bracelet. I don't smash it around though. And it does actually look brand new, all around, other than those marks. So, tegimenting is definitely legit. So another point, you could talk about is value for money. And this would be kind of pretty contentious for people. And there would be different ways of looking at that too. So, you would be able to buy at least 3 or 4 of the U50s for the price of the Yachtmaster, if not 5, if they were used. If you had the best deal on them, you know, if you bought one used, because actually this is more expensive used. This is much less expensive used. Not yet, actually. This is holding its value pretty well for now. Because I think they're not, I don't know if they're playing around or they didn't know how many they would sell or what, but there is actually, I had to wait for this for a bit. So they're not overproducing them for sure. So to buy a used one right now isn't that much less than buying a new one, but it would be, and in the future it definitely will be. Whereas you already pay a pretty big premium if you buy the Yachtmaster used. So yeah, it's somewhere between definitely 3 plus to 5 U50s for one Yachtmaster for price. So that seems like basically a no-brainer, right? The U50 is way better value for money. Trouble is, if you do consider the resale value, and once you have it and it's used, it's going to go down, and it's going to go down over time. So, and the Yachtmaster will definitely hold its value, if not go up over time. So at the end of the day, I would actually say, now I will probably get some thumbs down for this, but the Rolex is actually better value for money because it's easy to sell. You could sell it on Kijiji in an hour. You know what I mean? Somebody will drive from another city to pick it up if you put the right price, and like the right price being like an actual fair market value. Whereas the Sinn, I mean, if you try to get most of your money back, why would the person not just buy a new one for themselves, you know? So it is kind of tricky. I'm not kind of condoning what the Rolex market does. It just is what it is though. So I have a tough time saying that Rolexes aren't worth the money, for the simple fact that you get it back. So I don't know how it could not be worth the money. But that's just my opinion and my experience over time. So those are kind of some of the things. But again, if you're just going to use it, you're not thinking about resale, you just want to watch for every day, go for the U50. You know what I mean? If that's what you like and it's going to work better for you, then it's definitely a better value for money. You know, so because if you don't look at it as investment, and I don't mean investment for a return, but just investment at putting your money in something that you can get back out of it. If you're not thinking about that at all, you're just buying one, you're going to use it into the ground and just never go back, then the U50 is great, and it's a great value for money because it is a high quality product. So those are some of the things that I found, the kind of the U50 talking points. But there are definitely the better points. Actually, I'll do a wrist shot here if anybody's still watching. My videos tend to go a long time because they're one take and I don't have a script or anything. So this is how the Yachtmaster looks. I have an 8-inch wrist, so it's got a 47 lug to lug. I don't really, I mentioned the link to link, but it's not really a factor. because I've gotten into it in another video, but I don't know why they actually give the link to link. What would you call it? Dimension, because the link to link is on the outside of the bracelet. But if the bracelet, let's say you had a small wrist and the bracelet were pulled down, it's actually the effective link to link would be the inside, and it's actually smaller than the lug to lug. So even if these protruded, the bracelet would actually have to be hanging off for, which actually this is somewhat of a case for, but even still, not even, this won't compress down, but it's still shorter than the lug to lug. So I don't know why people ever kind of quote the link to link. I think Tim Mosso started it. I gotta blame him. I sometimes give him a hard time, but he's my favorite reviewer, so I'm just joking when I do. But he sometimes does make mistakes, and I think one mistake is that he focuses so much on the link to link dimension. But if you had a small wrist and the obviously, you don't want the bracelet to have to do this. You don't want a small enough wrist where you're not even filling up the inside of it, but that's like less than 45 millimeters because it's inside the lug to lug. I haven't measured this one. I have measured this one. This was 44.5 from the inside of the link of the bracelet to the other inside. And that's 44.5. So that's only 44 millimeter stretch of a wrist. Like my wrist bone is 66 millimeters. So obviously there is a lower limit, but I don't think anybody, it's not the outside of the link. So anyway, that's me harping on about not agreeing with people emphasizing the link to link measurement. But yeah, so I did this one already. So, and then I'll show this one. It's very similar. I'd say they wear just about the exact same. So as I say, I think the best way to actually measure your wrist is to take calipers and do the outside, because the circumference just takes in so many things. It's a circumference, the different shapes of the wrist, different amounts of like fat or how skinny you are. The watch really wears the way that from the one extremity to the other of your wrist. That's how a watch wears. So that's the best way to measure your wrist if you want to know how it fits, I think, because it doesn't matter how deep your wrist is or what the circumference is. It's much more about the wrist bone itself. So this is on a 66 millimeters stretch. So that's the best way to know how a watch is going to fit. Measure the span of your wrist with calipers. So yeah, so to get back, some of the things that I think the Yachtmaster is better for. So the movement is way better, and I'm just not going to make any bones about it. One thing I don't like about the U50 is the performance of the movement in a few ways. This when I got it and since it's about 10 seconds a day, and that's just not good. I could regulate it. I could open it and probably regulate it myself. I would not do that. I could bring it to a watchmaker to get it regulated, but it's just not worth it. But 10 seconds a day is not good. That's like over a minute a week. It's just not good. You end up resetting it. This has the 3135 movement, so it has a lot of upgrades. This is a Sellita, is it the 300? It's the 2892 clone. So there's a few things. The accuracy is going to be way better on a 3135. One thing that I hate is on the ETAs, there's like a danger zone where you don't want to switch the date. If it's getting like now it is, this is PM. So now I couldn't change the date. I'd have to move the hands around to do the quick set because you don't want to break the movement. There's really no effective danger zone on a 3135. The winding is just way better, but that's kind of like a haptic thing, but it's smooth and it just feels a lot better. The winding is totally silent. You probably can't hear that, but it's not a big deal. The 2892 is good. It's a great movement, 2892. And the Sellita, from what I understand, is pretty good. Should be as good. It's I'd probably put the edge to ETA, but anyway. Yeah, so there's a little noise. Like this is like ghostly silent. The winding is amazing. I mean the automatic winding. The manual winding is smoother and just feels much better. One thing I like about the 3135, which they've changed in the 3235, but it has a clockwise you know, you turn it clockwise to set the time clockwise. With a lot of other movements, you have to turn back. So that's purely just preference, but I just like the clockwise setting. I just like the 3135. I even like it more than the newer movement. But anyway, I won't get into that. So again, it does have the Yachtmaster does have a versatility edge over it. If you're going to, you know, if you want something more interesting, and if you want something that's a bit, you know, dressier or has more options, this would have the versatility. If you, you know, just want something more utilitarian. The bezel feel is not just the feel, but I always like a bi-directional bezel. But of course, it's not. I'm not, and again, I'm not picking a winner or saying anything. Obviously, I like the Yachtmaster better, but that's just my preference. But I just as an option, I always like a bi-directional bezel. Even if I were diving, I'd use a bi-directional bezel because it's very unlikely to move around. But anyway, that's a separate issue. But yeah, and the feel too. This is pretty good, and I do give the U50 credit because it does, the way it's constructed. Both of these, as I've said in other videos, but the way that they're constructed ensures that they line up, rather than the old school where you just pop in the bezel insert. These ones are both machined so that they line up. You know, there's something in the case that aligns with the way that the bezel is machined, and so they ensure that they line up. So I do like that. This is only a 60 click bezel. Doesn't have great feel, but it definitely works. I did discover that you can force the bezel backwards. I won't do it now, but well, why not? Who cares? You can force it the other way. But yeah, so it doesn't really matter. But the feel is definitely better on the Yachtmaster, and the bracelet is where they're kind of like miles apart. I'm making a really long video, but so I hope you don't mind. But you know, the clasp is probably what gets the least love on this. It's a folded clasp. I don't mind that. I love the old Rolex folded clasps. It's got the, you know, it's got the pull out, but it has no micro adjust. It has the micro adjust here, but it doesn't have a tool-free micro adjust. So that's a bummer. And actually what people don't mention, they always talk about a folded clasp, but this actually has hot spots. It's on the wrist. This is not nearly as comfortable as the Yachtmaster for a couple of reasons, but it does just have slight hot spots. It's not terrible. It's not gonna kill you, obviously, especially if you're like a professional diver. It's the least of your problems. But it's not, you know, it's not finished to that extent where they've kind of like mastered the feel of it. So the bracelet is amazing. I mean, Oyster bracelet is widely considered, you know, one of the best in the business. Oops, sorry guys. And for very good reason, because it's just has an amazing feel to it, so comfortable, and it has, all of the new ones have tool-free adjustment, which is a must for me. I live in a climate where the weather changes a lot, and so you know, if you're outside in the real cold and then you go inside and you're moving around and stuff like that, you will get a change. So this has the Easy Link. I think it's the Easy Link or Comfort Link. But you just get that 5mm. Another thing I have to harp on Tim also for, he always says that it gives you a full link of adjustability, but it doesn't. It gives you 5mm, which is clearly a lot less than a full link. I'd say a full link would probably be closer to a centimeter, 10mm. So anyway, it's like kind of like a half link, which is perfect because it's all you need. It's usually all you need. You know, it's not a dive extension. It's just that little bit extra. And I actually used it today because I was running around outside and it was crazy warm. It's October, but it was like 24 degrees Celsius here. But you know, so I was walking around and it's just what you need, that little bit, five extra millimeters. And so you have 3 ways to adjust it. You have the links, which you get your basic size, and then it has the 3 little divots inside. You can see I'm on the middle one. So just with the links and the divots, you'll get a very, very close size. It'll be perfect. I mean, I won't say perfect. You'll size it just right with those two things, because the divots are just, they're small enough. I've also found that these aren't, anyway, I won't even get into that. It doesn't really matter, but you'll get a really good size just with the divots and the links. And then, so it's fitting properly. If you need that little bit more, there it is, no tool. So it's like basically close to perfect solution. Glide lock is better, even closer to perfect, but they just don't, like we know, they just don't put glide lock on everything. So I'm trying to think, if you had a steel sub, no, they don't make a steel with polished center links, right? Only two-tone or white gold. So no, but on regular steel oysters, you can swap in a glide lock bezel, and I've done that. And I've also, the glide lock bezels, I mean clasps, I should say, the glide lock clasp will fit on the old hollow link bracelets too. So you can take, if you have a glide lock clasp on a sub or a sea dweller, not the deep sea, I don't think it's a different size, but anyway, just a little tip, word to the wise, if you need glide lock, you can get it and put it on your regular bracelets, like a Explorer 2, you know, or all the old ones, all the old ones. You could put it on an old sub, old Explorer 2 GMT Master, you know, like 16710. So that's a really good upgrade. But anyway, back to this. That's actually pretty much all I have to say. Only 36 minutes. I know I make long videos, but I know some people, there is a minority of people that don't mind the rambles if there's a little bit extra tidbits there. So anyway, that's kind of the kind of vibe on my channel. Long, uncut, unedited, no frills, no text, no production quality, bad cameras and bad sound, but anyway, that's my experience, and I like these videos if people go into them and say all the things they know about it or all their thoughts. So that's kind of why I make these videos. So if you liked it, thanks for watching, and always feel free to like, subscribe, leave comments. Like I sometimes say, I get so few comments that I usually always have time to answer them, so always happy to chat. Okay, thanks guys.